It's now streaming live on
Meeting is
Facebook.
now, yes. Okay, so welcome to the fourth episode of Researchers in Tourism. I am Ketti Hiezl, and today's guest is Professor Dr. Desmond Wee from the CBS International Business School in Germany. Thank you very much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Ketti. Thanks very much for inviting me. And it's a pleasure, really, also to contribute in whatever ways I can. And how are you, Ketti?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, good.
These times are really exciting, I would say, with COVID is still being here and not here. We are online, not online, so challenges. So we have met once actually in the EATSA conference in Turkey. To be honest, I looked you up a little bit more, and when I looked at your publications, there were like varied themes: heritage and culture, tourism, hospitality, then consumption, educational travel. So, where do you get your inspiration from for new research topics?
Thank you, Ketti. That's a really, really good introduction and also a very good question. It's very difficult for me. Some researchers, they know exactly what they want to do, right? So they go on from there. And, some people just jump on their PhD, and from their PhD, it launches them in many directions. And for me, it's I teach a lot. So I do a lot of teaching. And so it just means that my research is slightly compromised. I still try to do my research, but not in the way I do. So what I do is I draw inspiration from things that are happening around me. And something that I always talk about to my students in class is, you have to be aware of the world around you. So what is relevant? So what I try to do is think about, hang on, what is tourism? So I don't tell people what tourism is. Basically, I question what tourism is, especially, in the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, tourist behavior is changing, consumer behavior is changing. So how do we understand tourism? So what I do is I take the classroom, I'll take different aspects of tourism. So I'm personally interested in this idea of everyday tourism. I argue that tourism is not very special. It's not very exotic. In fact, tourism is so part of what we do every day on a common day basis that we start to question, the very things we do now. Why is this not tourism? Or if we go on a trip somewhere, we also question, wait a minute, hang on, that stuff on the trip is what we do every day. So both ways. So eventually what we see is tourism has become so much a part of our kind of a life form, that we need new ways of thinking about this. So my research basically moves in that direction to say, hang on, we can work with, heritage, heritage is changing, but what is heritage? What do we need to protect? What is culture? Or what do we need to preserve? And so before we start thinking of preserving stuff, we need to ask, wait a minute, where do we start from? And also, culture evolves. So where do we go with this? So how do we document all this is very, very important. And so it goes back to not just the content, but the epistemology of how things are or was and could be. And this is really quite interesting for me.
It's a really new perspective. I would say it's not, I never thought of it this way, to think of it like everyday things. And also, just like you now mentioned that you teach a lot, so you're not only a researcher, but also an educator. How do you organize your research and your time? So how do you make sure that you have time to navigate your tasks?
Ketti, this is another billion-dollar question. Billion euro question. That's not a problem for me. It's a problem for all researchers watching now. You will all have the same problem. We will all have the same problems. And so it's really a lot about time management, right? And priorities. So a lot of the research topics, going back to your first question, is based on my own passion. And so obviously my tip to everyone is always, don't do something that is in. Do something related to what your passion is. Right. So if digitalization is the new thing, and if everyone's talking about Instagram marketing, great. You can work with destination management and Instagram marketing, social media marketing, but big data, but I'm interested in that. But I'm more interested in how people look. So I always bring myself back to the gaze, right? So when you talk about time, you need to find that passion. If you're passionate enough about the subject, then you'll find the time to do it, to go outside to write. But what's also interesting is when I was doing my PhD, it's always hard to find time, right? So, my son was born during my PhD, and so I was like, oh my gosh, I had a PhD baby. There's no way I'm going to finish my PhD. But what happened was the contrary. Because I had my son came around, I had to take care of my son. I had to wake up in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep properly, but it just meant that I had to refocus on my PhD. So it meant that it was about a question of focusing. So after a while, you realize that, okay, you're focusing on the PhD. Okay, wait, what are some important core aspects here? How does some of that PhD translate into articles? And what goes into research? What goes into published research? And what goes into interesting stuff that you can work with students on? So suddenly, this thing expands. And so something I also am working on right now is this idea that you can't really detach teaching and research. For me, they're essentially the same thing. And so when I write about educational travel, it's not to say that, oh, this is about education. No, I'm saying that this is research, right? So if we can think of education or learning, so learning, teaching, and research as being able to come together under one roof, right, without needing to separate, then we find that maybe we can think of managing time in a certain way. I mean, the new buzzword now is research-based teaching, right? So this is a buzzword, but I mean, you can say that, okay, I'm practicing this, but I don't like to think of it that way. I like to think of, actually incorporating everything into one. Yeah. And by that incorporation, I do try to find time. It doesn't always work, but this is the way I try to manage.
Yeah. So disclaimer for my PhD fellows, we have to figure out how to do this without a baby necessary, because not the best motivation to.
Not the best, or do it. Or
do it and try.
Yeah, then you guarantee you'll finish your PhD on time.
Yeah, so it's hard to get time, hard to manage our time, and but at the same time there is this importance to publish quality research, and still there is an academic pressure to also publish a lot. So how do you think, what would you suggest a PhD student should do to navigate in this paradox that we are a bit new to research, it's not coming naturally to us, we should produce lots of articles, and at the same time we should produce quality. So what would you suggest?
Another brilliant question, and also a difficult one, because the standard is publish or perish, right? Yeah. So this is standard. Everybody says that, but my question always is, you need to take a step back. Yeah, what is the meaning of quality? I don't know the meaning of quality. And if you tell me that quality is demonstrated in 5-star journals, 4-star, star journals, you have a ranking. So if you're a good PhD by the book, you should be publishing in only certain kinds of journals. So for example, the EATSA journal here, is a waste of time. It is a waste of time. So why should we do it? So again, going back to the idea of quality, I would publish in EATSA journal because of the people. I know the researchers that it means that when you collaborate on a topic, the ideas together feed this knowledge, and this knowledge grows. So if you look at it in that way, where knowledge is integrated, then do that. I attended a conference. I wouldn't say which one, but I was very disappointed. I was very excited to see the keynote, who was a very well published, one of the most published tourism academic researchers and in the world. And one of he did a seminar for PhDs, and this seminar was basically how to get published in A-star journals. And as he went on, I was like, wait a minute, he's basically systematically telling everyone to not publish in places like EATSA or like edited books. It's a waste of time. Edited books, it's a waste of time. So I'm like, wait a minute, how can you say this? Because this diminishes the quality of my idea of quality. So if you did research on me, and if you really did a rank impact factor on my articles, most of them have very little impact factor. Okay, except for one that is super high. Okay, but aside from one, if you add it all together, my impact factor is not very strong. But I can say the editors of the books I've contributed to, I pretty much know all of them. I've spoken to them. We probably had a coffee together, maybe even a beer on a boat. And those of you out there, you hear this, you know who you are. And there's some really nice conversations. So that book for me, that book chapter I've contributed to was not just my article, my paper. It was everybody involved in this, an entire project on its own, the editor's hard work on this, and we build this up together. So it is a cumulative project. And I think this is, for me, what quality is. How do you kind of manage the two? And of course, you need to get your A-star journals in. But before you think of A-stars, you need to think of networks and collaboration. How do you build up that portfolio? And after a while, when you build that networks up, you have 10 A-star journals versus 10 publications where you know all the 10 editors. And every time you build a project up together, you have a lot of synergy, right? So this is something that might be important to think about. How is this synergy built, and what quality really means, at least quality to what you are. If you are a PhD student who really aspires to be a professor in a top university, then you need to. There's only one way to go. But just another example on this was I went to a different conference, and one of the things I do a lot is I take students out a lot on student projects. So I call them, kind of learning projects, project-based learning. So I take students out and I write papers about this. Now, a lot of professors, this one professor who was presenting said, no, he can't do this because it's really, really good, but it doesn't add to his portfolio. So it's publish or perish. And so he was advising people to not do it. And I was really, really angry at this conference. And I was saying, no, you have to encourage people to actually do this, because we have a duty as educators to work with students and help knowledge grow. So and sadly, it is still publish or perish. And you need to really find a thin line, a fine line, where you want to straddle. And obviously the question always is a bit of both. In my case, it's more of not conforming to the stereotype, but I'm also in a position where I can do that. And maybe that's why I do what I do now. So.
But would you say then, if depending on our future goals, we should find, like, at least this is how I interpret now what you said, but like we as PhD students should find what our future goal is, and then what would be quality for us, in the sense that if I learn from a collaboration with on a project, because there is like a professor or a researcher there from I can learn a lot, then maybe it's better to do that and not concentrate on who want to fancy high-level journals at that time, but to learn.
Totally. So don't think of the journals. Think of what your epistemology is. What is your method? If you're an ethnographer, like my background is anthropology and sociology. So if I'm an anthropologist, let's say, there are only a handful of people who know that subject. Right? I mean, there are quite a few, but there are a few known people, and you can latch on to that pathway. If you're going towards the quantitative approach, you also have a handful of people who do that, or a lot more. So after a while, you will know where you stand. And the object of a PhD is to really help you figure out where you stand in this. So are you going to do quantitative or qualitative research? This is not a really interesting question for me, because you could do mixed methods. But what is the framing? What's your framing device? What is your core philosophy? Yeah? I'm a qualitative researcher. This is me. Obviously, I'll do some mixed methods here and there, but the point is that is me. So in your PhD journey, the first thing you have to do is recognize that it's a journey, and then see how you actually, bring the subject into your existence. So it took me, I knew exactly what I was going to write about when I first started my PhD, but it took me about 3 years to come up with my research question, because this is the most difficult thing, getting a research question, because you think you know what you're doing, and after a while you realize, no, you're off. And then you try to go off there, and after a while you go all the way all around the shop. And what happens is usually when you get back to when you submit your thesis, you realize that your research question is pretty much closer to the very first version you started off with. But you had to go all around, no? And
that's good to know, because I'm at the round at the moment, I think. Maybe lost in the forest somewhere. Like
but it's good. It's good to be lost. This is another tip. If you don't get lost, something is wrong. Yeah.
Okay.
And because you know exactly what you and most of the time, and if these are the ones who basically say, oh, I want to find, x plus y equals 10. Okay. And this is quite simple to do. And if you have nothing complex to say at the end, why is your PhD so interesting? And so but when you get lost, that is where you really start, picking up, finding friends along the way. That's when you start figuring out, wait a minute, this is probably the hole I don't want to step into, or this is the hole that I want to step into. And then once you step into that hole, then the question is, how deep you can go.
And would you say then, while we are in our PhD journey, should we then try out different hats, or should we consciously try out different methods to see? Because what I see now is there are certain methods that are used in my university, so that's what I'm going to do. But I would say that maybe it would be interesting to try out more things. So what would you think is best? That if I think one thing is good for me and I only do that, or should we make an effort and try out other things? What do you think?
It really depends on where you're at, right? If you're on your third year and you want to try stuff out, it might be a bit late, right? So you have to figure out what you want to try and when you want to try, and who, most important, who you want to try it with. I suppose you already, PhDs always have a supervisor, or at least two. So if you need to know if this is your supervisor. Usually your supervisor will be able to guide you in certain ways. So usually you end up going in pretty much the same direction as supervisor. It's very unlikely that you're going to, go head on with a supervisor and fight with his theories, right? So I would say, you need to figure out, if you've chosen already your supervisors, then you pretty much will be going in a certain way. So you don't need to disrupt too much of that flow. What you could be doing is you could be innovative in that flow. So for example, if you're working on, let's say, if I do traditional ethnography, right? And right now it's the time of the pandemic. You're not going to say, oh, because it's a pandemic, so I'm going to do quantitative research and do surveys online. No, I can say, wait a minute, hang on. I do ethnography, so I need to adapt. Wait a minute, didn't Cozy Nets write something about netnography? Wait a minute, netnography is also where people interact, how people interact, but they do it online. Wait a minute, I can actually analyze all the feeds, TripAdvisor, Instagram, Twitter, blogs, YouTube videos, all these suddenly come into the picture, and like, whoa, this is a different kind of ethnography, but I'm embellishing it, still using basic ethnographic principles, but embellishing it digitally. So it's not about, changing the system or rewriting the system, but it's more about adapting to see what really fits you, the system you're in, the professors you're with, and your passion, the way you would like to go. It's not always easy.
Well, I am really lucky with my supervisor. She's really open-minded, so there is not so much is going against her. I'm pretty sure she would support me in whatever. But then for others, less fortunate people then we had some great tips, I would say. So you had been a life coach and a concept developer, and then you became a lecturer and a researcher. So you also said that lecturing and teaching is a little bit in the taking your time from research. But did you always wanted to be a tourism researcher, or did you more wanted to be an educator?
I started off as an educator, so I was basically teaching at more like trade schools and stuff like this. So I was teaching things like I was teaching poetry to engineers. You know, I was teaching dancing as well. I didn't write that in my CV, so you don't know about that. But I was doing a lot of these other things, you know, like everything from ballroom and stuff like this. So, but you know, I wasn't sure. And this is probably another PhD problem. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I knew what I didn't want to do, you know, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So I was going around looking to figure out what it was, and then I realized that I love traveling. And you know, one thing led to the next. You know, I started looking out for different kinds of PhDs, and then I started moving in the way of tourism. Obviously, I was going towards the social sciences. I knew that, yeah, but I didn't know exactly what. And tourism was great because tourism allowed me to really, you know, delay my decision-making process on what I really wanted to do. But tourism is also vast, you know. And what I like about this idea of tourism, and when I first started it, I actually got a scholarship in England for a PhD in tourism. So that's one of the reasons why I took it. That's the simple answer. But tourism is vast. And the beautiful thing about tourism is, you know, I always ask the question the other way around, you know, can you tell me what is not tourism? Give me one thing that is not tourism. And then we can have a chat about this, right? So everything is tourism. And this is based on my theory, which makes tourism so exciting, but it also makes tourism very hard to pinpoint on, right? So someone might say to you, wait, where's the tourism in your PhD? You know, you know, so where is that? Yeah. So this is always difficult to manage. But as a topic, I mean, I think tourism is always vibrant, even in the pandemic. I mean, obviously, you know, everyone is pretty much saying the same thing now about the future. We don't know, but you can have a few good guesses. But the point is, I think the central theme is tourism is resilient. And it always will, you know, it will always be there. And the question for us is, how do we take this a step further? To think of, you know, what tourism will do for us. So, you know, this will be a question that you might want to ask.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
And we talked about a little bit of your PhD time, that it was really challenging also with the baby and everything. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself?
Myself, right? If I could go back in time, I'll split this question to two. If I could go back in time and change anything, something, the point is I would not change anything. So that's the simple answer. And if I had to give myself some advice, I wouldn't do that because I would assume that I'm talking to me, right? So, but if I could advise somebody else, I wouldn't do that either because the person would probably not listen to me. So let's pretend that I could reframe this and I would extract the most important things I took out of this PhD. I would say it would be to play hard, at least before I had my baby, to play hard and to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
You need to learn how to play hard and work hard at the same time. This is so important. Because if you don't know how to play hard, you know, like go out 2, 3, 4 a.m., you know, getting totally wasted, and then making sure you wake up at 7 in the morning to go to your 8 o'clock class or discussion or conference, this is basically how you need to do it. Because the most fulfilling encounters I've had, you know, I was very lucky to have a PhD in which I met so many very important tourism scholars that kind of directed me along the way. And it wouldn't have been possible if I was just behind my books. You know, I attended so many conferences. And a lot of these tourism people, many of them passed away. Even like, for example, John Ori, for example, he attended one of my conferences that I organized about 7 years ago before he passed away, and he came because I said, you know what, we need to engage tourism. We need to get people to rethink this stuff. And he came all the way, you know, to a very small university in Germany, you know, but he came anyway. So John already came, and I was so happy to meet him. But the engagement with people, the engagement with fun, you know, and the conversations you have along the corridor with your other PhDs, yeah. So not the formal classes, you know. I remember one class I had, the professor said, "Okay, good. This is the end of class. Now we're going to the pub."
Mm-hmm.
And this is the real place where you're going to learn stuff. So there are 10 of us who went with him usually to the pub. We used to get, to drink there at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And this was great because this was the real learning, or getting your PhD students together and generate discussions, you know, think tanks. this would be, and we did all this, right? And this really added to my journey. So it wasn't the classes per se. I mean, there wasn't so many classes anyway. It wasn't the reading, it wasn't the real writing of a PhD, but the engagement with different people, with different places, with different kinds of knowledge. And this was really, I would say, precious. Really, that PhD journey was really painful, difficult, but I must say it was also one of the best experiences of my life, because of, so much emotions, so much learning, and so much, so many to get out of this. So and I'm very happy to to talk to you, because I'm so happy to that you're also on this journey in a way, not the painful part, but that you're going somewhere with this, and it's really nice to see people on the journey, and it's very enlightening. Good. Yeah.
I have one more question which just came to me during this conversation. So, and it's more about really personal about me and not about other PhDs, but maybe it's good for others. So I really would like to be an educator myself. And I was always really inspired by my now supervisor, Dr. Petra Gyurác-Németh. And I always felt like if I want to be a good educator, then I need field experience. So I went out, I had some experience in different hotels because I felt like that's how I'm going to be able to teach. But now that I'm also starting to become a young researcher, stepping on the stones of that road, I'm also feeling like in a way I needed maybe that experience to get inspired. So what my question would be that would you say that is it possible to become a researcher and only focus on that aspect, or become an educator and only focus on that aspect, or is it more existing in a triangle where all these three fieldwork, education, and research should be included? So how would you feel? Is it possible just to do one without the others, or should it be somehow balanced? Coming up with a model right now. Yeah.
I think you have the answer for this. And but the question, of course, is, what are your priorities? There's some people who only want to do research because this is their passion. So reading, writing, getting great publications out, this is their core. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're not so interested in teaching, fine. There's some people who are totally interested in teaching, and this is why I am in a privileged position, because I don't really get judged on my publications, because I'm in a place where most people prioritize teaching, right? So which is good. We teach a lot, and I try to inject different kinds of pedagogies into my teaching. But I think obviously the best answer would be to, I would say the best way is to try to put all of them together. And it's not easy. And one of the ways I do that, as you can see, I actually work on this project. So I basically teach. I actually, so I basically publish 3 articles now, where I take students. I teach a course. The course involves me taking students out of the classroom, right? So they will do some kind of mini ethnography on consumption theory and place. Identity, let's say. And then what happens is they would actually present their findings, we'll take it back to class, they'll be examined based on their findings. And with the top group also, the top 2 or 3 people who are interested in pursuing this further, we will write a pedagogy based on this, what actually happened in this class. So then it really fulfills all aspects. You actually publish a paper, you actually work with really nice teaching pedagogies, of which you engage the students, and the students also teach me. So I'm not just like teaching the students. The students are really, teaching me a lot more than I'm teaching them. So this is a way of facilitating the process through projects, through different ideas that we have, and also to discuss with students, younger people, how we actually can build a project together. So and this synergy that you've already mentioned, I think is really the way to go. I mean, you shouldn't think of just teaching. I mean, you could if this is really your thing, but if you've already done a PhD, it just means that you have an edge in research. Why not try to put that into teaching as well, and obviously do it on a topic or a topic that you're passionate about, not something that is just by the way, but something that you really, really want to take it a step further. And so now, I mean, I'm at a stage in my life where I realized that all my articles converge, and it's one of the reasons why I'm in EATSA, because I realized that I'm really trying to balance the meaning of what Europe and Asia means. And if Europe now is undergoing a crisis, an identity crisis, how can we look at Europe from the outside? And so I realized that my articles I'm writing, I haven't gone in that direction, but I realized that this is really the core. And so that's why EATSA is so important for me to learn from other people, how they might think about this idea. And so this is where I'll be gravitating towards, even though I have small projects from elsewhere. But the thematic is clear. Of course, I have a few other points to that, which I wouldn't mention here, but you will develop this along the way. So you can be teaching, but the courses that you teach, you also find that you would be gravitating towards a certain direction. So like for me in tourism, it'd be tourism geographies, critical tourism, for example, and if it's more social science, it'd be cultures of consumption. So so this kind of topic. So yes, I teach, but I also know the areas where I want to teach. So
yeah, okay, thank you very much. It's really a lot to think about. And I want to ask Enrico if we have any questions in the Facebook Live, because if I remember correctly, you are not on Facebook, so you can't read.
I can't see a thing. Yeah,
you can't see it later. So
okay.
No,
good.
okay, not now. All right. So I promised 20 minutes. It became 30. So I don't want to.
That's my fault because I talk too much probably.
No, I asked extra questions that I wasn't planning to. So.
All right, good. Because I'm always the guilty one. Trust me, I know this.
I never take time frames. The time is relative, Einstein said. So it's,
I like that too. So why not take 6 years for a PhD or 7 years, right? You don't have to do it in 4 years.
Well, maybe the university would disagree with that one, but
where are you now? How many more years do you have?
I'm in Hungary, and officially I have
your PhD.
With my PhD, it's my 3rd year. So okay. I should finish in the next semester, but because my research is involving hotels and I wanted to ask them about things and their revenue, I'm thinking about maybe doing a bit of a gap in my research and wait till there is a hotel industry again, or changing the direction. So it's the pandemic was giving me extra challenges
But this is important. This has to be part of a PhD. The very pandemic is a part of this, especially in the part you reflect about this. And obviously it's going to be extended for whatever reason. But I mean, I think it's good that you're very focused and on track. So I don't, it doesn't seem like you have too much of a problem.
Well, hotel reception experience. Not let them see. No, I was thinking a lot about actually including the pandemic or changing it to the direction of the pandemic. But I think that because I want to, or I'm researching personalization in the services, I feel like that is going to be a relevant thing even after the pandemic, and it not necessarily should be involved now that there is a COVID. So yeah, it's exciting. I don't know how it will be like. I will be doing it in like X+1 year, but
well, good luck with this. I think it's going to be great. And EATSA, I'm sure everyone at EATSA will be very happy to read your research, or at least have some of your work published with the journal. And really looking forward to this. At least a presentation in the next conferences. I'm sure it'll be very exciting.
I'm working hard to be able to participate and bring something to the table. So hopefully. All right. So I would like to thank you for taking your time. Maybe stay here a little bit so Enrico can have also a word. But I would like to say goodbye to everyone who watched us live. And then if you have questions, Desmond can't see it, but maybe I can send it to you if it's something that is really. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you very much, Ketti.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.